Well,
Black people like pets.
Calling the Finance Committee to order. All members are present and accounted for. First item is approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the agenda as written.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
I do. Sorry.
Oh,
we have to add that FT that I think somebody reached out to you on.
Yeah, but do we have it in writing? I don't.
I'm sorry.
No, but I'll send it to you guys. It's FT 521.
Okay. Is it something we can show on the screen? The problem with you sending it to us is we're on our computer, so we can't be both in the Zoom session and also reading email.
Some of us are ready for that. Got them both.
Well,
right?
I could be too, but
I'm ready now.
All right. So with the addition of FT5 there is a motion to approve the agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the January 6th meeting.
Mr. Chair, move approval of the minutes from the January 6th meeting.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. All right, I'm not seeing FT5, but moving into supplemental appropriations, the first item is SA 23-21, which is a CBDG grant dealing with COVID money, $227,676.
That's correct. This is coming from U.S. Department of HUD. It's the Cdbg, like Alderman Arnett said, and it's a third round of funding. There's no match requirement. And there was also a breakdown attached to the SA. And Lynn is on too. She can talk more about it, but it kind of goes through how we expect to spend those funds.
So I see Teresa Wellman's on as well, but she and I are still working through the details of how we're going to spend it. But what you have there explains the basic gist of it. There are, Teresa can correct me if I'm wrong, 4 projects, I believe, that are that we are weighing now to make sure that they are eligible and that we will submit them to HUD. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, Alderman Gay, it looks like has a question.
Well,
so
Alderwoman Finlayson had her hand up, and then Alderman Gay.
Oh, okay.
Well, I guess my question is, are these funds in addition to, or is this the normal CDBG allocation?
They're in addition to. These funds are in addition to.
Okay, so could we see so is this going to go back to the Housing Committee to make a decision about recommendation about how these funds will be allocated?
No, the Housing Committee that does that no longer exists. It's now the Affordable Housing and Community Equity Development Commission. And it does not have a role in overseeing the CDBG allocation.
So I guess that's concerning.
Yes, and we said, oh, I'm on camera.
Sure. So we need to send this to a committee of aldermen to have input on these these allocations. But I think it would be helpful if we could have in front of us the current allocations for CDBG funding.
Alderwoman Finlayson, one of the issues that came up and one of the reasons that that function was removed was based on this recommendation from the city attorney about aldermen administering programs. So, and I see the city attorney's on the.
Well, I'm that kind of, I think, is leading us down a path that's going to be very uncomfortable for all of us, because when we get to community grants, we're going to have input. And likewise, we should have input on CDBG grants. So, Mr. Lyles, if you want to chime in, I see you there, or Mr. Chair, you want to.
I caught the tail end. I was logging. It was kind of had me logging in at the time of that last comment. If that could be repeated, I can answer it. I heard the city attorney being mentioned.
Well, we had Assistant City Attorney Berger on, and I don't know whether she wants to answer, but the question was raised when we changed the committee structure because there were administrative things. We now seem to have no committee that reviews these things other than this committee. We are a committee. So the question from Alderwoman Finlayson was, how do we have committee action to review these allocations of the $272,626?
I don't see anything that interrupts your review of the grants. I guess I'm missing something.
Alderwoman Finlayson, would you care to amplify on your question?
Yes. Mr. Lyles, on the information that we received about this grant this morning, decisions have been made about what organizations are going to get this $272,000. It sounds like a staff decision. My question is, when does the council weigh in? And I said it looks like it's taking us down a path where the council doesn't have input on allocation of funds for community groups, nonprofits, the like. So right now we have something that says how this $272,000, which is additional CDBG funds, will be allocated to community groups. And in the past, and through the distant past, we have had issues with favoritism and that kind of thing. And that's possible with the alderman too. But we want to make sure that does not happen.
Yeah, I think the best way, and I'm kind of getting comfortable with the processes. It is likely best for the council to arrange this in this way. Come up with a paradigm for the grants for the departmental and executive staff. And then all grants have to fit in that paradigm. The council always has the ability to change something, but right now I don't see that there is a paradigm established by the council, such as we will dedicate money to serving the poor. And so all grants have to serve the poor. They have to be going to 501c3s. They have to have corporate designations. Some of that is part and parcel of already the way the departments do it, but it's unclear that there is a council dictate for how these monies are dispersed. So that's one. So that's a way to have a filter from the interests of the council back to any individual being kind of pushing the grants in a particular direction. You kind of insulate yourselves from that kind of thing by having a rubric that the departments can follow, the city manager can follow. Secondarily to that, you also have the ability, if any of that goes awry, to review the release of funds to any particular organization. But I would say that what you're looking at that point in your decision is whether or not the rubric was followed, as opposed to whether or not a quote unquote pet, grantee received the funds. Mm-hmm. Now, you as a council have the authority to give the money to whoever you want to give it to. The issues become when it looks like favoritism, when it looks like things are being directed in a way where there hasn't been proper vetting. And what the council does not have is all the infrastructure that the city manager has built to actually do that vetting. And I've seen in the past where elected officials, hey, give the money to their great group, but guess what? They haven't filed their annual returns with the state in 4 years. So they're defunct as a corporation, or the 501c3 has some issues. And so because all of that infrastructure is with the departments, it's better to establish a rubric first, give you some insulation. And it's clear that if you establish a rubric, even if you say that there are some types of groups that will normally get money because you describe them, I think that's a better way to approach it than identifying a particular entity to receive money. We know in Annapolis, there are only so many of these entities. So it's likely that everybody is going to fall in those rubrics that you design in a way that facilitates giving the money out, but doesn't look like it's always favoring a particular group or not.
And thank you. I thought we had a process in place in the past.
We have a process, but the rubric by the council is not established.
I understand that. And I understand you from a legal perspective wanting that rubric. What we did in the past was to allow staff to pretty much vet the organizations. And then it went to a council committee where the staff had an opportunity to share their knowledge about the committees and discuss the recommendations from the staff. And then that council committee would then do their due diligence, and then it would be brought back to the full council. That was past procedure that we've eliminated. Okay, right or wrong, it's been eliminated.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know who eliminated that because I'm not quite as familiar.
You did.
Did I? I didn't know.
You did by the recommendation.
Okay.
Duan, do you mind if I let City Manager Gerald go next? Yes.
Sure.
David, please.
Sorry about that, Alderman Gay. I was just going to suggest that so there's two pieces of this, right? What we're asking for today is just approval of the funding coming to the city. The second part is what the funding is going to be used for. I was going to suggest that it go to Alderman Gay's committee, the Housing and Human Welfare Committee. It sounds like, and I'm not certain of this, but I think I heard Lynn say that this list is still being fine-tuned and still being developed, and it's not a done deal yet. So I would just suggest that when it is finalized, that we take it to Alderman Gay and his committee for approval or for input or revisions, just as my suggestion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make that recommendation as a motion. That we send the CDBG recommendations to the Alderman Gay. What's the committee now?
Housing and Human Welfare.
Housing and Human Welfare Committee for review, in addition to, of course, finance.
So I would welcome that suggestion. I don't know if that's in the form of a motion. If it is.
Yes, it is.
Welcome a second.
Okay, second.
By discussion, though, I want to get back to clarifying this whole issue of whether this is an administrative issue and therefore should not be done by council committee, or whether this is something that can be assigned to Alderman Gay's committee. Remember, we took alderpersons off of one of these committees. I'm always confused as to which is which, because it had a mix of policy and administrative functions. And there was quite a bit of debate about that. We later had debate about the same sort of thing with the audit committee. And so I think this is an outstanding issue of, you know, what council committees are doing and what are not to be done because they have administrative and personnel functions. I don't recall off the top of my head, Duan, maybe you remember the charge of your committee. First of all, are you interested in accepting the assignment of reviewing this to your committee as we're moving?
I think that if it's within the city attorney's recommendations, then yes, because I mean, the reason we were removed from housing and community development was because they said it was overstepping our powers as council members by reviewing the grant funding. And so the fun thing is, though, that if you move into housing and human welfare, it'll be the exact same older people overviewing that, because we both sat on those dual committees. So I'm perfectly fine with that. I think it should have stayed that way.
So I think there's a couple of different issues floating around here. One, I think we do need to have some kind of opinion from the Office of Law about whether Housing and Human Welfare Committee can accept the responsibility of reviewing this grant allocation. Secondly, the city attorney has mentioned establishing a rubric, and I guess I'm kind of curious as to what the process is where the council establishes a rubric. Is that done by a committee? Is that done by a meeting of the whole? It's not clear to me what the auspices are. I understand the concept, and I think it's correct that we need to have general setting of goals. That's what the council does, rather than specific administrative functions. But it's not clear to me where those goals get established or where the rubric gets established.
You can do it through a resolution at any particular point in the year. It's maybe something that could occur around the budget season. Because what you want is, when the money comes in, you want staff to be able to make the determinations that get the money out to the organizations that you deem are appropriate. The only issue, and I guess this is where the confusion is, we never said that the council, the committees couldn't review what was going out. The issue for us on the legal side becomes when it looks like you're picking winners and losers. And that could be, or you are implementing the grant process in a way that looks like staff action. And so that's, it's a fine line in some respects, but I may not be as clear because the word review has had many definitions in the past few months. Review is, hey, I don't like that, give it to them, and don't give it to them. That kind of review would be problematic, as opposed to, did you follow the rules we established? Did you follow the rubric we established? Did you follow past practice? Are there any issues with the financial arrangements and the books of any of the organizations? That is an appropriate review. Did the departments do what they are supposed to do? Is a review. I think it's appropriate. Once you get into, well, I like this organization, I don't like that organization, take money from them, put it over there, that becomes something that muddies the water, I believe.
Well, but let me speak to that directly, and I'll recognize you in a second, Duan, please. But the council can't pick winners and losers, but the staff can. I mean, clearly 4 winners have been chosen here.
Well,
we are not even given the purview of what were the options for the distribution of this $272,000. So we can't pick winners and losers because we're not given any choices to review. And I don't know if this went to Housing and Human Development, whether they would be given additional choices. And it's not just a choice of winners and losers, it's magnitudes. There's very different magnitudes here about the amount of money. Half of the money is going to one organization, which part of the justification for that is cut off on what I'm looking at. So I can't even see exactly what all is going on. But I guess I'm trying to understand all of this rubric setting and who gets to pick winners and losers. There's obviously always going to be winners and losers. And I think that's the thrust of what Alderwoman Finlayson is saying, is we should have some overview about what the choices are that are made and the magnitude. This is presented to us as 4 choices only and dollar amounts allocated only, take it or leave it. And I really have a lot of problems when the council is given take it or leave it decisions. But more importantly, how would, if it went to Housing and Human Development, would they be shown a broader purview of options of groups that could receive this money? Or are they going to be just shown this same list of 4 and the same dollar allocation?
Well, the council has the ability to approve any of the allocations it wishes at the full council. So that your power is always there. With respect to whether or not there should be more, then what the response of the committee or the council was, okay, stop the process, open it up, and let more people apply. And then you, as part of the community engagement process, ask more groups to apply to come through. I don't know, staff may have an answer as to, only 4 applied or only 3 applied, but those are technical issues I don't know too much about. But the council does have the ability to approve allocations or scrap the whole process and start again. So there is more of a general authority that you have. We were just trying to keep you insulated from specific detail with respect to a particular organization. But that's not beyond your authority. It's just, it gets a little dicey.
Well, I'm going to recognize Fred because he's on the committee, but I do see you have your hand up.
Mr. Chair, I'd call the question. I'm hearing the same things 3 and 4 times at this point.
I would prefer
vote yes or no. That's all.
I would prefer to recognize Alderman Gay before we do that. He had his hand up before you raised yours. So if you would accede to that, I would like to hear from Alderman Gay.
I'll go fast because I'm out on the committee. But just a couple of points. I think that the staff has a good system. Teresa Wellman, I think she works with Patty Norris, Lynn, and a crew. They vet the organizations. So when it is stated that we accept organizations with, the financial flaws and IRS issues, I think that's not true. There have been instances where they've applied, but they haven't been eligible. And that's something that I've discussed with Lynn about setting it up so that we can work with our communities who want to create nonprofit organizations and get them to the point where they can be successful. Secondly, I think that when I came in, we didn't pick favorites. What we did was shook it up because there had been a history of serving primarily white nonprofits working in Black communities. And so what we then did was shook it up and said, all right, well, let's broaden the scope of who we're sending this list, these draft emails out to so that we can get more responses. That's where we started getting these different organizations with different goals and actually working in our communities. I think it's been very successful. I think that Teresa does a good job at vetting what organizations come in. We view them. We had great conversation on the Housing and Community Development Commission. That's what I loved about it. The issue was when we removed the alder people, I had an issue with that. But to the point that Alderwoman Finlayson said, we do the same thing with community development grants, which is $400 and something thousand. So, I just think that the system works and we mixed it up a little bit, but if we could get back to that normalcy, I think it can continue to be effective.
So to Alderman Payone's point, thank you for that, Alderman Gay. We have a motion to defer this decision to Housing and Human Welfare Committee and come back with a recommendation from them. But I have a feeling the city manager is going to tell us there's now some time sensitivity to this.
No, I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that what we're asking for now is just acceptance of the money by the city. Right? The CDBG grant is available to us, $272,000. I think that the discussion of uses should be postponed from this committee and moved over to the Housing and Human Welfare. And we can have the discussion, the process of how these get selected and what staff does and what the priorities are of that committee. But I would just ask that we take a vote on this, accept the money, and then let the uses be determined by Alderman Gay's committee.
Is that acceptable to the members of the committee? So
yeah, that's where we've always done.
The motion before us now is to recommend to the city council acceptance of the it's $227,667.
$272,000.
Yeah, 200. Yeah, I know there's two different numbers here. I'm looking at 227 and I see 272 elsewhere, so it's not clear what the correct number is. But in any event, the motion is to accept this money. You're right. In the form itself, it says 272. In the description, it says 227. Transposed number there, but whatever the amount is it the sense of the Finance Committee to recommend to the council that we accept whatever this money is? Yes. All right. So the motion is to recommend favorably on SA 23-21. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Boy, is there something in the water?
I know, 2 days in a row.
I know. Next is SA 24-21.
Before you move on, Alderman Arnett.
Oops. Yes.
I'll fix the numbers and the description. I just have a question about Alderwoman Finlayson's motion. You guys did not vote on that. Are we not voting on that one? That was what was on the floor.
I understand, and I guess technically we need to dispatch that one. So all in favor of recommending that Housing and Human Development Committee review the allocation once they've received it from the administration, signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. All right. Thank you, Takia, for keeping us on track. Next is SA 24-21, which is monies for medical. Is this fire? I don't. Finance Director Katie, could you please walk us through this essay?
All right, I'm here. Katie's dropped off.
Right.
Thank her for taking my place for the first 10 minutes. So
she did a wonderful job.
Yeah, good. I'm sure she did. And she usually knows more about these than I do. But this is the fire department has an opportunity for some additional funds, just a small amount as you see. And we've put there in the description what they'd like to get. A child mannequin so they can do CPR training, and a newborn advanced care simulator, and some books and some pediatric life support instructions. So it's from MEMIS.
Are there any questions from the committee? Chief Romali, would you like to speak to this?
Oh, there he is.
No, this is it's the only issue is it's a quick turnaround grant that has to be done before March, which we can do, but it's $2,000. It's no matching monies to it, and it'll be used for training.
Alderman Pam.
I move that we approve SA 24-21.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. All right. Now, Takia, I have a problem because my phone, Adobe Acrobat, is not letting me open FT 5-21.
We have it, so we're going to share the screen right now.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
So, who's going? Jody, are you going to explain this to us? Finance Director, Madam Finance Director.
Okay. So in this situation, remember we got the pilot money from the state, and originally the legislature was giving us the $750,000, and they put a caveat in there that we would perform a study, a housing study, and that was going to earmark $40,000 of that $750,000 for a study. And at the last minute, the state pulled into the fiscal year, the state pulled the $750 and changed it back to the $367. And that was done as a pandemic cost savings for the state. So we have the $367 in the budget, but the earmark for the $40,000 never went away. And we didn't find that out until in the fall. So when we still were required to do this study, but we didn't have it appropriated anywhere. And we didn't have, you can't say that the $367,000 was additional revenue because we already had it in the budget. So we've done the study as required, and we have the pilot money from the state, but we need to appropriate the monies in the Office of Law who procured the study, because the study has been done and completed. So we would like to use contingency account funds for this cost.
Thank you for that explanation. Do we have a copy of the study? Have we seen that yet?
I think I saw a copy of it on an email at some point. I think it's been done several weeks now, and I will defer that question to either the city attorney or the city manager. I know the study is out there.
We can email it out to the council right now.
That would be much appreciated. In the meantime, the issue at hand is this covering the cost borne by the law office of $37,500 coming from the contingency fund. Alderwoman Finlayson.
I don't object to this SA 24. I guess my question is, this sounds like an unfunded mandate.
Wait a minute, we're on FT 5-21.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you're right. I'm on the wrong one, but I am on the right subject, just the
yes,
wrong
you are.
Sorry. At some point, Ms. Dickinson, Mr. Lyles, do we go back to the state or to our delegate and try to secure the funds that we've had to take out of our fund, our general fund, really, to, get these funds back?
I'll leave that question to Jody.
I was not the one, and maybe the city manager had the conversation with the state after we found out that caveat was still in there. So I'll let him speak.
Will tell us, we had that conversation. They will tell us that it was funded by the 367 of pilot money that we got. So they gave us the great courtesy of carving out part of our reduced pilot to cover this cost.
Then I suggest when there is another discussion with our delegation that we share our concern about how this is handled. Because I understand that this recommendation for this study came from the delegation.
Well, from a particular delegate, so maybe we can go back to her.
And that is correct. They wanted to have this study done, and I think when they pushed through the $750,000 for us during the budget process, they said, we'll do the $750, but we want to earmark some of it for this. Mm-hmm. It was in a separate part in the budget legislation, and that never got removed, and they understood that, but they still wanted to use it for the study.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation to FT 521.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
I agree with you, Alderwoman Finlayson. I think the state is being fairly high-handed, and I also think that our delegate could have helped us a little bit more. Our former colleague and delegate with this one, I do believe in the purpose of the study, and of course it was part of the consent decree as well, but does seem to me like they could have managed this a little bit better for us. Next item on the agenda is an update from the finance director.
So is this, hold on a second. All right, so just my normal update?
Yes, or okay. It can be an abnormal.
Okay, I just thought that would come at the end. I'm usually at the end, and I knew we had some big topics to discuss, so I'll go ahead and tell you what we've been up to.
Well, it's up to the committee. If you want to move to the other topics, I always do and enjoy hearing the update from the director.
But I can do 2 minutes if you want to give me 2 minutes.
Yep, that would be great.
All right, so we're, as you know, we've gotten started with the budget process. We've had a few meetings with departments to talk about their budget requests for next year, and everybody's working really hard to try to cut down on their budgeted items. We've had some really good discussions along those lines, and those will continue for the next couple weeks, and then we'll start to put together a draft of the budget based on what we're planning to do as far as the personal services side. We have an upcoming, we're scheduling a meeting with the unions again to talk about possibly reopening the negotiations to document any understandings we come to for next year. And also the CAFR is in the final stages. I hope to have that done by the end of this month. I've told the auditors we're all gonna have to push it really hard to get it out by February 28th. We continue through the water bill relief program, but we can address that when we're talking about I thought we were going to talk about utility stuff today, but no, I guess it's not on the agenda. So that's it for me. I mean, I'm still interviewing for assistant finance director and haven't come to my solution for that yet. So
any OpenGov update?
So that would be a Katie question, and she's no longer on. We've bought a small package of premium support hours from OpenGov to not only help with doing the budget book, but also helping us further some of the uses of the public facing side. Just get some stories out there on OpenGov. So we're moving along with that, but nothing for you to see yet.
Alderman Payon, did I see your hand up? Because I do see Alderman Gay's.
You did not.
I did not. Alderman Gay, please.
Thanks. I actually thought about this last night with the budget recommendations that we made the last time we all were actually together when we had that little work session on the Saturday. When will we start to have those conversations again, as we get closer to the budget? Maybe, just picking which ones we would be comfortable with moving forward, or that you would think be more realistic moving forward?
Well, you are quite the good one, because that is exactly the next item on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
This discussion of the fiscal 22 budget process. To my mind, we had 3 good sessions, and we got right to the brink of doing the tough thing that we're going to have to do for fiscal 22 unless circumstances have changed dramatically, and that's too much to wish for, I suppose. But we're going to have to start thinking about reductions in spending, and reductions in spending mean inevitably reductions in services, or finding new ways to do services much more efficiently, and reductions in services inevitably leads to reductions in staff. And those are tough, messy, nasty kinds of things to have to talk about, but we are going to need to talk about that. And one of the reasons why I wanted to put this on the agenda is because I think we need to hear from the city manager and the finance director about how soon will we be in a position where we can reconvene a work session to start discussing some of the options that we're going to be needing to consider. I do not want to defer those discussions until after we receive the mayor's budget, and certainly not until after the finance committee turns over its recommendations to the city council. That's 1 month period of time, or actually 3 weeks, and that's not enough time to discuss what are going to be very painful topics of discussion. So city manager or Director Dickinson, I would turn to you and say, are there some generic kinds of things that we can be talking about sometime over the next month or so in terms of either or kinds of choices for reductions?
We can. We may want to have those in closed session just so we can have frank discussions of what's going on with the labor negotiations, because that's going to be key to all this. And we have issued letters, so we have reopened bargaining with all 4 of the represented groups. We have meetings scheduled with them, so we're continuing with that. It's very sensitive information, as you can imagine. But we put together a plan to talk with them. Most, as you all know, most of our costs are on the personnel side. So if we're going to close the $7.4 million deficit that we have, and by the way, we're still, we're keeping a close eye on what's going on in DC with the President Biden's recovery, because the Senate has now passed the reconciliation, which is the first step in basically the Democrats going alone on that package. If we get money from that, that will be a huge help to us with the budget. And we've made that clear to the unions as well, that, if we get us a significant amount of money, then that's going to change the dynamics of the discussions with them. but we'd be happy to meet with you to update you on what our position is that we're going to present to the unions and have that discussion. And we're having very fruitful meetings with the departments, as Director Dickinson mentioned, and they are working hard, because on the non-personnel side, which is what they're proposing, it was cut last year and it's pretty bare bones, but they're coming up with some additional savings. So good for them for that. They're taking this seriously and coming up with some good ideas, although it's just really on the margins. So if you would like for us to schedule a closed session, we can do that. I think we may need a closed session for a different issue anyway, so maybe we could tie those two together and do both of those.
Let's not do too many things in one meeting, but I do think we look to you for guidance. I think a closed session sometime soon is very desirable. You've already given us some good news, however, because last I knew the deficit was 9.5 million and you just mentioned 7.4. So we've somehow made some progress. That's $2.1 million off the nut. So that's good news right there. The council committee members, Alderwoman Finlayson.
Manager Gerald, can we pursue a longer work session? For some reason, we have committed ourselves to 2 hours, and it is never enough. So, maybe we need another half a day, and maybe on a weekend, to really get into some of the meat of what we should be discussing. So I would propose that you give us some options that are outside of the normal parameters that we seem to have set for ourselves, so that we can be a little bit more, I don't want to say more productive, but more productive.
Yeah, it seems like I agree with you, Alderwoman. We just start to get warmed up to the topic and get to the critical point, and then our 2 hours is up. And I was going to further suggest that we schedule that session someplace where it's warm.
Florida? Is that what you're suggesting?
I was thinking Mar-a-Lago myself.
No, not going to Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, city manager.
So I think the first meeting just needs to be an update of where we are and what we're doing, and not so much taking feedback from you all, though I'm sure we'll get plenty, but just to give you information on what our plans are, what the numbers that we've kind of worked out that we're presenting to the unions, and then as soon as we get through some of that process and see where that's going and have a better idea of what's going to happen in DC, then we can circle back. And the other thing that we planned in is that so the budget will be presented on a Monday at a council meeting. I don't recall the date, April 16th or something. But that Thursday, we're going to have a large council work session to go over the budget and to go in detail and present the budget books and all of that. That's a bit of a departure from the past, but we felt like that very first week that the budget's presented, to have all the council together and go over what has been proposed will be useful. I don't know if that'll be another place to have that same sort of discussion, but that is on the schedule.
Okay, and it is April 12th. Alderman Gay?
Yeah, just to be clear, we have a work session coming up on the 10th as well, correct? We got an email and
I think it's either the 10th or the 11th. I forget which date it landed on, but it's either the 10th or the 11th.
Okay, awesome.
It's
I think
Thursday,
majority of
the 11th.
What time would it be?
What date are you talking about? I don't have one on. The 10th is, are we talking about April or are we talking about this month?
February, next week.
February.
Yeah, so this is the one to follow on to the discussion of the comp plan. Since we didn't finish that, we were going to set up a separate work session to discuss the comp plan. So that's either on the 10th or is that the 11th, Takia?
It's Thursday, the 11th, beginning at 3.
I don't have that Did you send out an accept to Kia? Because I don't have that.
Ms. Gaines will be sending that out.
Okay, all right, because I was going to say, didn't have that on my calendar. Are there other points of discussion on this topic? I think we've got a plan, and I agree with you, City Manager Gerald, that the first meeting is just for you to set out the parameters, and I agree with Alderwoman Finlayson. I think when we're ready to get into discussion, and I hope that's fairly soon after that next meeting with you, Mr. Gerald, we probably need more time. I think that's going to be a very tough and emotional meeting.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question for Ms. Dickinson that goes back to her report, if I might ask at this time. You mentioned the water bill relief, and you said you would talk about it later, but it's not on our agenda.
Oh, yeah, I thought it was on the agenda because there have been some talk about the utility cutoff. We resumed our utility penalty and cutoff procedures in January, and there's been a lot of emails going around in the council about trying to resume our program of not cutting anybody off. And I thought that would be on this agenda, but I see it's not. So I will wait and talk about it. I know that there's maybe a resolution coming up or something for council to talk about.
Well, Alderwoman, did you want to talk about it now?
Go ahead.
I thought she was suggesting that there was a plan, but it sounds like the plan is coming from the council through legislation.
Well, yes, and I had thought that there was some talk about talking about this in the committee, but I could be just getting confused because the emails were coming from all different directions.
So Takia has her hand up.
Yes, Alderman Arnett suggested that you guys talk about that under the economic development impacts in one of the emails that he had sent.
Right.
So, yes.
But we can talk about it now. I think it is an important issue. We did have a flurry of emails because of one particular person being cut off, which I want to thank everybody in the administration. That situation got resolved almost. It was resolved before I even read the email, so that was pretty quick.
Well, Alderman, if I might, all of the situations were not resolved. And so I guess my question is, I thought that there was, from the state down, a moratorium on cutting off utilities, especially during the winter months, but even in a pandemic. So do we not comply with state mandates, or maybe it's not a state mandate? Maybe I just
when the pandemic first ensued, the governor issued a mandate that utilities could not cut off customers. And that mandate was rescinded in September. And the county resumed they made the announcement in October they were going to resume their procedures. We waited. We found that out about the county through indirect means. And so we decided we would move forward and reinstate ours as well. But we waited until January 1 to give everyone notice that we were going to change back to our normal procedures. And we did that. And at the end of November, we accumulated a list of all the past due balances that were building because of the governor's order. And we sent out this major mailing with past due notices with a letter from me saying we were going to resume in January, and then gave them options as to what they could do. We are offering payment plans that they could pay out past due balance through May, that we had this new program, the Water Bill Relief Program, where we used some of the CARES funding and we gave it to Boston Tech, who is anybody who reaches out to them who meets the qualifications, Boston Tech will pay us for their past utility bills. And if they qualify, they have certain income limitations, and they have to show that they have been affected by COVID, because that's one of the criteria of spending the CARES money. So we've been using that money to cover those that are eligible as they reach out. That mailer went out with that big mailing, and then we continue to refer people to the program that call us when they get their notices. The big problem in the last month, which has caused a lot of these emails, is that the United States Postal Service isn't delivering their mail. And we identified several instances where either somebody had mailed a payment in and it wasn't to us yet, or we identified one batch that we mailed, I think it was December 10th, didn't get to people's mailboxes until January 21st. And so we had a lot of people calling from that group, and we've decided then to waive the late payment penalty because we had sent them a delinquent notice and they hadn't even gotten the first notice. So we are waiving those penalties now. And I think that in the problems with the resumption of our policy and the mail slowdown, people have been cut off. And I think that the reason there's been a flurry, one is the Postal Service, and two, we had that big catch-up mailer that we did at the beginning of December. And so we are now back to our normal procedures. We send out a cycle billing. A month later, we send a notice that they're past due, and we assess a penalty. And then we give them another month before they're scheduled for cutoff. That's our normal procedure. And then when they call, we will tell them, if you are affected by COVID and you meet these qualifications, contact Blessed in Tech so that they can evaluate you to see if you qualify for that program. And the Blessed in Tech representatives told me last night that they've used, we gave them $200,000. So far, they've used $115,000 to pay for these utility bills. There are also other programs they refer them to if they are not eligible for that program.
So maybe I'm thinking BG&E that doesn't cut off utilities during the winter months.
I don't know what BG&E's policy is on that. I know that the governor's mandate forbade any utility from doing that. But when it was rescinded, it was up to the utilities, but the Public Service Commission had a limit. You had to give them 60-day notice or something like that before you resumed. Mm-hmm. And that's all my understanding of what kind of regulation they would be under. They may have their own policy.
I would just add, because I don't think that Director Dickinson mentioned this, but we've mirrored what the county has done.
Yeah.
So they're doing shutoffs again. They set up water bill payment benefit fund, just like they do. In fact, when they first set theirs up, we thought the city residents would be eligible for that, but in fact, it was just those that are on the county water system that applied to. So we went ahead and set up ours, and we're trying to work with all our residents. We do not want to shut off water to anybody, and so we've been working with them as best we can to either put them on a payment plan if they're not related to COVID, their delinquency, or to get them over to Blessed Ministries or whatever they're called to actually get their bill paid for.
Mm-hmm. Jody, I'd like to call you a little later because I have a specific situation in my ward. But I think is the CDB, going back to the CDBG funding, the $120,000 that's being recommended for Blessed in Tech, is that going to be used? Do they do other things other than?
And I think Lynn, Assistant City Manager, Ms. Farrow, can tell you more about the programs they're doing. That money may be earmarked for some other effort.
So yes, they do a number of other things. They are running our warming centers now, and the funding that is in the CDBG recommendations is to continue the food pantry at the Pitt Moyer Center what we've always called Food Friday, that was started by OEM. And now initially that program fed about 30 families a week, and we are now up to almost 130 families a week. And we hope to grow that to 200, but it is specifically focused on feeding families, food insecure families that live or work in the city of Annapolis. It is very targeted, and we do deliver to families. And I mean, there's pickup is available, but we deliver to households in the city of Annapolis through that program. And Blessed and Tech is going to take on managing it because it is too big for city staff to manage now that it's almost it's over 100 families.
I'm very familiar. I volunteered on many Friday mornings over there, so that's great. I think knowing these little details will be helpful to the Housing Committee when they look at the grant allocations for those CDBG grants.
Yes, and as Alderman Gay said, we really are having a little bit of a paradigm shift here to ensure that city residents are getting the benefits of these resources.
All right. With the committee's permission, I think the next item on the agenda is to discuss liquor fees. And Alderwoman Tierney has been taking the lead on this, which I want to thank you for, but I think we need to discuss the financial implications. I think there are a few options that have occurred to me. One is waiving fees, another is reducing fees, and a third, which if we're going to do anything I find most appealing, would be delaying payment. But we're talking about a significant amount of money here. I think Director Dickinson, you had indicated, is about $500,000, if I got that number correct. We don't have $500,000 to spare. So while I think we have to be sensitive to the plight of our businesses, we also have to be sensitive to the plight of our coffers as well. So Ellie, did you want to make an opening statement to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you so much. And I believe both you and your colleagues thought this would be a good path forward to review with the committee. Just very quickly, we all know what generated this. It was an initial request to me from Mr. Anthony Clark, who owns several restaurants. I forwarded it to the law office and the city manager and the mayor, and then I remember that the mayor has to recuse himself because I know, liquor fees opens up a can of worms. And then I got some clarification from the assistant city attorney on what was really happening at the state level, what they have received from the state. And also I received the information from Jody on how much this would cost if we completely waive the fees. And so just for a little background, the authority to collect the liquor fees is a privilege afforded to us by the General Assembly, and the city has a fiduciary responsibility to the residents to provide services that are from this fee. In 2009-2010 fiscal year, the fees jumped substantially. And this generated a request. It was sort of a perfect storm. The fees were raised significantly. There was, for lack of a better word, sort of saturation of liquor licenses in Ward 1, which generated my predecessor, Alderman Dick Israel, to form this Crabble report. And that's sort of the benchmark from where these fees that we now have and still have were generated. It was realized at that time that the jump was not substantiated, and so then they were brought down to the 2009 level. And I believe that those fees in that fiscal year 2010 resolution have not have not increased, and that's what I've been scrambling with paperwork here to see. I believe they've held steady since 2010. The funds collected for liquor licenses are not placed in a designated account, but like all fees for service in the city, they're placed in the general fund. This does not, absolve the city from utilizing the fees collected from these licenses for the purpose of providing services, related to the liquor licenses. So that's a little bit of a background on the genesis of these liquor license fees. And then the current status of the relief given to the restaurants, because that's what this is all about. The restaurants, we all know, are suffering. And there is a lot of stuff in motion. And I think that's what Anthony Clark spoke to, was what was before the Maryland Senate. Hope Stewart was very kind to give us sort of a synopsis of what we have provided to the restaurants, and as much as we could. These were grants, et cetera, and in her calculation, that would be, up to $20,800.
Ellie, do we have that material? I don't recall seeing that.
He sent this to all of us February 2nd at 12:12 p.m.
Okay.
I could read it very quickly. I understand you're talking about this, blah, 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 blah. The first grant round was in October. Initially, it provided $10,000 to catering businesses, bed and breakfast, dine-in, non-drive-through restaurants, and $5,000 for food trucks. The second grant round was in January. The funding was available for businesses who did not apply during the first round. In the end, due to additional state funding, food trucks will end up receiving $15,800, and other categories, restaurants, et cetera, will receive $20,800. 111 Annapolis food service businesses have been awarded these grants. The first round of the restaurant and food service grant program was supported by $10 million, $5 million in CARES Act funding, and $5 million from the state of Maryland. The latest round was supported by an additional $3 million from the state. And she, at this time, was not aware of any additional funds coming through the county from the state for restaurants, but she keeps pretty current on that. And then the only thing subsequent to all this is that in reading the Crabble report, one of their recommendations was that to give the restaurants the ability for liquor license fees to be paid in a bifurcated payment, the first upon license renewal on April 30th, and the second payment due 6 months later on November 1st. So I do have that pending question to the law office on whether or not we do practice that. Do we give them the opportunity to split their payment? The finance director referred me to the law office for that question, and I see that Cindy and Michael are both here, so maybe they could help us with that.
Yes, Cindy could answer that question.
Yes, Alderwoman Tierney, we do offer each establishment the opportunity to pay their liquor license annual fee in a bifurcated manner. The first fee is actually due by April 1, because all fees are due by April 1. If you choose the bifurcated payment, then you pay your second payment by August the 30th.
Okay, I thank you very much. I wanted the Finance Committee to be aware of that. That is, that offers some relief in this pandemic. Just to reiterate that, basically a payment plan. And then I think the Finance Director is here to sort of reiterate the cost of completely waiving these fees. And I would refer that question again to Jody, to Director Dickinson.
I was going to interject that last year there was, I don't know if it was a governor's mandate or the county delayed their collection of their liquor licenses for last spring. And we did the same. We required them to pay, I don't know, it was August 30 or August 1. We were collecting them in July and August. So we were able to give them that delay last year. And when I look at the transactions in the system, there's a lot of those smaller one-day events. And the larger numbers were somewhere around 500,000. But Cindy would be able to give you the breakdown, which ones of those are liquor stores versus restaurants versus bars. That breakdown that I don't have because I don't know what the council is interested in doing here.
Could I just ask, was that a correct statement that I made, Cindy, that the liquor fees have not substantially been raised since fiscal year 2010? They've remained pretty steady?
That's correct.
Okay, that's important for the Finance Committee to know. And then the other fact, this is sort of anecdotal, that I know that Mr. Clark referenced the county fees as being quite less. And I just think logically that may be because that they have more businesses, but that's just my anecdotal response to that.
So I see we have Hope Stewart on. Is there anything, Hope, that you can give us to help shed some light on this discussion?
Actually, I don't have anything additional. I know that we were brought in to talk about what aid has been provided to restaurants. So that's why I wanted to talk about the restaurant grants. And I know that every time they get additional funding, they do their best to make sure that it's equitably dispersed throughout all the grantees. But if you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right. Well, maybe we need to turn just in time, Alderwoman Finlayson.
Well, I was going to ask two questions. One for Ms. Stewart. Could you provide us kind of a listing of what grants have gone to whom as far as businesses are concerned, so we can see where the help has ended up?
I can tell you that there were about 500 grants throughout the county. 111 of them went to Annapolis food service businesses. 92 of them went to restaurants. And on our restaurant list, we have 150 restaurants, but that includes fast food restaurants, chain restaurants, drive-throughs, and those are the ones that were excluded from the grant. So I think it's safe to say the majority of restaurants in the city did receive these grants.
Okay, sorry, I can't turn my mic off and because my phone is ringing at the same time I'm trying to ask a question, so forgive my phone. My other comment is more of a comment than a question. You know, if we're going to look at this in a comprehensive way, which I think we should, I think we need to put on paper the implications for all of our options. You know, what's the implication if we waive all fees? What's the implication if we reduce fees by a certain amount? You know, what's the implication if we do nothing? But I think, and maybe Ms. Gaines can help us with this in part, as well as Ms. Dickinson, to give us a real picture of the financial implications for addressing the concerns from the restaurants and our liquor fees.
I'd like to add one more item to that, which is why are we, if we're going to be waiving fees for restaurants or liquor licenses, there are all kinds of other fees we charge businesses. Where do we draw the line? You know, I think I can just see a long line of people forming up with requests for relief. And I also think, remembering back to the days when we were discussing Crabble, there's going to be a long line of citizenry in favor of helping liquor licenses, and particularly licenses after midnight. So I think we're on the precipice of a very slippery slope, and I would urge that we proceed cautiously, if at all. Alderman Mayo.
Thank you. There are very few other fees that are as important to businesses as the obtaining a liquor license. I mean, that is the means to stay in business or make a profit for certainly for bars and maybe to a lesser extent restaurants, but they're still crucial even to restaurants. I can't think of any other business fees that we charge that are the equivalent of that for any other type of business. I mean, you're right. There are other expenses, and if we're not careful, we'll, be caught in a morass. But I think I don't mind going over each fee and deciding which ones we're going to waive and which ones we're not. There's a very legitimate reason in the case of liquor license fees, though, that simply does not exist for most other retail businesses.
I guess I'd like to see more empirical information on that, but I think that the very first thing we need to decide is, can we afford to be forgiving, or whatever it is we choose to do? There's forgive, reduce, and delay fees. Can we as a city afford to do that and continue to provide other services? And I see Alderwoman Finlayson's hand up again.
Yeah, may I defer to Ms. Gaines, and then I'll ask my other question.
I just wanted to add that whatever the will of the council is regarding this matter, I just would like to make you aware that each renewal process begins in November. So I've actually already been working on this a couple of months, and it's very deadline driven. So at this point, I would just like to make you aware that whatever decisions you decide to make, that you be aware that I'm continuing to move along in the process because I have to meet the deadlines as they come upon me, unless you want me just to stop working on renewals altogether.
Well, and thank you, Ms. Gaines. I think we should look to you as the person who's responsible for our liquor licenses, for your data, as well as looking to Ms. Dickinson for her financial implications, the data for that. This has far-reaching implications, period, because, if we're talking about businesses that are not restaurants and they not getting the support they need, then they could go out of business, just like restaurants can go out of business. So, it's going to be a difficult challenge to help the businesses so they stay in business and not, put ourselves in a negative balance, trying to offer that help. So, but I just think we need to look at all of the data in writing, in front of us, in a chart, so that we can really do some analysis of it. So, thank you.
I couldn't agree with you more, Alderwoman Finlayson. Alderwoman Tierney?
Thank you. I just want to put something in context with the liquor licenses in this pandemic. The liquor licenses have allowed them to operate during this pandemic in more than any other way. The Governor Hogan, in the first state of emergency, if you remember, we were all shut down, but they were allowed to off carry because of their liquor licenses. Do you remember that? You could they were sort of operating as bars. They were open, Armadillos had their window open saying, here, take this home. And you could, and then the recovery zones were focused, on having their liquor license, operate. So I just think we want to put that into context, that we have tried to optimize the use of their liquor license, as well as acknowledging some of the restrictions we had with the closings coming down from the state. So I just want to put things in a little bit of perspective, and that's probably in response to Anthony's first response to me, was where he was kind of angry, not knowing, what some of the things that we have done and some of the restrictions that were handed down to us and not necessarily our choice. And then I also want to say every restaurant is different. I've only heard personally from Federal House, Galway Bay, and a few others downtown. And as we all know, they are optimizing the use of their liquor license, but yet I see reductions in revenue anywhere from 10 to 20%. But again, it's a citywide issue, I'm sure. I just wanted to say that.
So, committee, it feels to me like at this point we perhaps need to, I think we've enumerated a number of bits of information we need to get. I would look to the administration to provide us a list of other things, but I think that we need to be prepared if we're talking about waiving licenses in this narrow lane. We need to understand the door that we're opening, and I'm sure that there's any number of businesses and others who pay fees that can be immediately getting in line to pursue this, and I think we need to be very careful. Director Dickinson.
Yeah, so I didn't hear the list of things you need, the things that we can provide. Cindy and I can pull together a list of the total that we collected, how much is from each type of business, and then it's going to be up to the council. But I will say, I think I said this in an email, if you waive the upcoming fee, that is revenue we would have recognized in fiscal year 21. So if you waive it, we're short 21 revenues by whatever the fiscal impact is. If you waive the whole thing, if you waive it for all those $500,000, then we're short 500. I will need to know where to cut expenses in fiscal 21 to compensate. If you delay collection like we did last year, we actually accrued those revenues back into 20 when we delayed last year. So if we collect it soon after year end, we can recognize it in 21. If you cut part of it, well, again, if you cut half of it and we waive $250,000, then we have to find a way to cut expenses to compensate. So I'll just put that out there. If you have a specific scenario you want to put out there, I'll be glad to run those numbers with Cindy. But other than that, all we can give you is a list of who paid the fees and what type of business they were.
Mr. City Attorney, and then I have something to say.
Yes, I have a question for Cindy. Have we been collecting fees up to date? Or is money coming in?
Not for this new upcoming renewal period. It's just starting up. So,
okay. So we
haven't even mailed out the renewal documents yet. That's to be done next week.
Okay. Yeah. So what I bring that question, Mr. Chair, because if the letter goes out next week and there's no curtailment of these fees, people will start sending in money. So then the question is, when you cut fees, are we then reimbursing people once we've collected the money, which implies that we have to set up a system for keeping money segregated. And then that goes to Jody, because if the money has to be rebated, we got to know where the money is. And, you know, it sets up another kind of thing that we need to be aware of.
I appreciate that.
The money's all in one place and it comes out of the same place. It's just you're creating extra work if you make me collect it, record it, and then send it back out in a check. That's just double work.
Well, you can do this instead of doing the 2022 budget.
Right.
So I understand the logic of what is being requested. The restaurateurs are saying we're paying the liquor license, but we're really very much curtailed in the business we can do because of the virus. I have to say personally, the only thing that I'm willing to consider once we get more information is deferring the payment. And I think deferring it for a short period of time, the logic there is eventually some of us will be getting inoculations, and we will eventually get this virus under control. It would be nice if that were to be occurring at the end of this fiscal year, which is the end of June. And so a deferral could make some sense, but as we just heard, that means that you're going to have to start managing that. There's new administrative costs to it. And I'm very much troubled with how do we justify deferring liquor licenses and fees, and not deferring other fees, particularly, and if my good colleague Alderman Gay were on here, I think we have individuals who are paying various things that are hurting even more than restaurants. And I guess my first priority would be to give relief there, like for water bills and other city services before giving relief on liquor licenses. But I guess I would poll my colleagues on the Finance Committee. It seems to me that this is a topic we keep alive. We get more information and we put it on the agenda for further consideration. But I personally I don't feel we have what we would need to make any kind of recommendation. And then I would look to the city attorney. I assume any recommendation we would do would have to come in the form of a resolution. Since fees are done by resolution, I would assume that changing any procedure relative to fees would also have to be done by resolution. But I seek your advice on that.
Yeah, the issue with the resolution is important because with liquor license, with fees of all kinds, they're normally done in the budget season. So we're talking June, after 2 months of already accepting liquor license fees. So that's an issue. We might be talking about next year, but right now we're in the season, and without that resolution at the budget season, you're already kind of missing this year.
Alderwoman Tierney and Alderman Pound, did I see your hand?
Nope, not mine.
A few minutes ago, it's already said.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm getting some texts as we talk here. I didn't say that quite correctly. The revenue loss that I mentioned, 10 to 20, is on liquor, but as far as operating loss, I'm getting texts anywhere from 30 to 40%. So I just wanted, for public record, to say that I misspoke on the total revenue loss from some of these restaurants.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yeah, we are, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Nothing's going to be as it normally is. And if we have to make changes to our budget that we can work out, I don't think we need to confine ourselves to the normal schedule. No one is doing anything normally today. So, I just want us to think out of the box. I want us to come back with the documentation to show us what the implications will be if we, and I'll say this again, if we do nothing, if we reduce fees 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%, okay? If we delay fees, what's the implication on the 21 budget and the 22 budget? So that's the information I need. I am not wedded to any one of the options. I want to keep all the options open, but we have to have the data in front of us. And anecdotal is great, but hard data is what we need to see. So I would hope that when this comes back to us, that we'll have this information.
Thank you for that, and I agree with you. I think I heard the finance director say, and probably Cindy too, they'd like a little more definition in the kind of information we'd like to see. Perhaps you and I could work on that list, Alderwoman Finlayson, and get that back. Director Dickinson?
What I think we can provide you is a list of the fees we've collected and what type of business they are. Break down the business types as far as we can. I can't see that from what I see in Munis, but I'm sure Cindy can provide a full list of everything that's collected and what type of business it was collected from, including the little one-time event receipts that we see. So we'll get that to you fairly soon. I'm sure Cindy probably has it prepared anyways from all these questions that have come up. And we can get that to you, and then you'll have to decide how you want to defer, waive, what you're willing to do.
Thank you for that. I would say at this point it would be appropriate to have a motion to suspend discussion of this till the next Finance Committee meeting. At which time, thank you.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I think we have one last item on the agenda.
Can I just thank you very much, specifically Alderwoman Finlayson for sharing the burden here. Thank you very much. And thank you, Alderman Arnett, for coming to my rescue. It isn't just my decision just because there's a lot of restaurants in Ward 1. Thank you again.
But it did feel like you were getting beat up a little bit, so I felt like I had to come to your aid.
Yeah, I can handle it.
Doing yeoman work and you were getting abused in the process. So, so I think we have a plan and we can move forward. The last thing, I think, Alderwoman Finlayson, you wanted to have some discussion, and we have Corey Bradley on to talk about the impact of COVID on city finances. I think, am I characterizing that correctly?
Yeah, I wanted to hear about, from your perspective, Mr. Bradley, and I apologize. I don't think I've ever met you, so welcome to the city. You've probably been here for a year or two. Welcome. From the risk management perspective, how are we doing under the conditions of the pandemic? I guess that's my question.
First, I'll say thank you for having me on to speak about this. I think the city has fared extremely well, considering we've got 714 employees. And through the course of 10 months, we've only seen 10 positive cases within our workforce, which comes to my math around 8%, a little more than 8%. But and so we have a team, a COVID response team that was put together pretty much the start of this in April. And we've put a lot of things in place to help us tackle this. And I think that's been to our benefit and help us keep our case numbers so low.
Okay, so our employees are wearing the masks. They all now have shields. Thank you, City Manager Gerald, for working that out for us. So they are doing what they need to do to protect themselves and thus protecting the city and us as a liability for us.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, if you guys give me a few minutes, I can walk through some of the things we've done. If you guys like to hear it.
Yes, of course.
So like I said, we started this COVID response team, which consists of, there's 4 of us. There's a member from the Office of Emergency Management, a member from the Office of Law, Human Resources Manager, and then myself. So from the start of COVID, we started doing departmental walkthroughs and wanted to see what departments needed to make it inhabitable for employees and make it safe. We broke that down into 4 major areas: technological improvements, building improvements, changes in processes, and then employment action. Right around that same time, we started screening and temperature forms, which you see in all city buildings. You come to City Hall, you get screened at the front desk. We have a lot of employee communication, and we update the employees with current policies. We've done training with all the managers and supervisors on how they impact COVID. We send out screening forms. We also send out notification to the individual departments when they do have a person of interest or a positive case. We created the employee support website, which is extremely robust, and I implore all of you to take a look at it. It has information from the Centers of Disease Control, from Anne Arundel County Health. We put all of our city forms, any policies or memos that have been issued. And then we also update with testing locations, and now we're adding vaccine information. So as I stated before, we did do a manager and supervisor training. That was broken up in the 4 areas that the support team manage. So we went over city policies and compliance of executive orders. I covered workers' compensation. Human Resources covered the FFCRA. And the Office of Emergency Management talked about our employee support. So once we started with COVID, we needed to identify how are we going to clean and sanitize all of our buildings, which is a big step. First thing we did was we created a policy for it, and we clean for prevention. That's the first step. So our cleaning crew, we met with our third-party cleaning crew and make sure they have the right supplies, and they clean every day all of our city buildings. Then we do an enhanced cleaning and disinfection, which is done by our public works team. That involves them spraying an aerosol disinfectant using an electrostatic sprayer and fogger. And then we have, after a confirmed COVID-19 case, in 2020, we used a third-party vendor as SurfPro, and they would come in after every positive case and spray. Since then, we are now transitioned over in 2021 as a cost-saving measure and having our public works team do it. They've been giving the proper PPE, they're getting training, and they've got the supplies to do it. And I think it'll save the city some money, us doing it on internally. That's pretty much a general overview of kind of what we've done to combat this. And I mean, if you guys have any questions, I'll gladly try to answer them.
Well, thank you for that.
It sounds like you've been successful since we have so few cases. And I'm an English teacher, not math, but I know it's not 8%.
City Manager Gerald.
Yeah, if I could just clarify that, because I think Corey said 10, but it's actually 60. I think he just misspoke about that. But
I'm sorry.
I'd like to provide a breakdown of where those cases came from. So 16 of those were in the fire department. 15 were in the police department. 12 were in recreation and parks. 7 were in transportation. 5 in public works. So those are all our largest departments, obviously. And then the other 5 to make 60 were just spread through the smaller departments. Again, 8% of the workforce, we think we've done really, really well. And we're proud of that. And Corey, you know, it's been interesting this last year. We've had, you know, some employees that have really stood up and did a great job. Hope is on this call. She's clearly one of them. Stephen Rice. Corey is one as well. He's done a fabulous job. So thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? May
I ask one more question? I'm sorry.
Certainly.
I was surprised that transportation was not higher on the list for, and I've moved on to vaccines now. Why are they not considered more vital? They come in, our bus drivers come in contact with, you know, is it because our bus service is down, or are they just, you know, there's just no understanding of what they do? I don't know.
So public safety is the highest group, and they've all been done. We have a whole group of employees, including the bus drivers and you know, our water treatment plant operators and the folks that are repairing our water and sewer lines. They come in the next bracket. So they're essential personnel, but they're even, you know, a level above that because they're absolutely essential for continuity of operations. So we're going to seek ways to get them moved up so we can get them vaccinated.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good job.
All right. Is there any other business before the committee? If not, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, there is another item on our agenda, which is the animal control canine.
I'm so sorry. You're absolutely correct. Alderman Payon, am I to understand that you're withdrawing that legislation?
Correct.
So does that take care of that item on our agenda?
I believe it does.
Okay.
So, and now is there a motion to adjourn?
There is. I move that we adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. We had an awful lot of help from city staff and attendants, and I always appreciate it when our other colleagues are able to come to this meeting. So thank you for doing that. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.